Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Partaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Graditam Purananim Munanina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharatataila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sudam Devam Kamsachanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us in this first Gita class of the year. We are in the 18th chapter, well over the middle part. We're coming into the last third of the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna has divided human beings into four varieties in the past few mantras, based on the three gunas, or the trigunas, just as he did when discussing the three types of knowledge, the three types of actions, doers, pleasures, etc. The only difference is that before it was sattva, rajas, and tamas. And now it has become brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, and shudra. Now, if those words don't mean much to you, then you should probably watch the previous few classes. But I'll just say in brief, Brahmana means the people who do the spiritual things in any country. Kshatriya is like civil servants and probably warriors, so we would say military, and rulers, like a governor is a ruler of some kind, so he would or she would be a Kshatriya. And then Vaishya is the merchants and the corporate people who, entrepreneurs and so on, that buy things and sell them. And Shudras are the people who support everything else in society, support all of these three things. So, what if someone asks, why the division? Krishna said that since our inner disposition is determined by our mental qualities, each one of us displays one of the four basic swabhavas, or characters. If you know something about Ayurveda, you know there's something called a Sharira Prakriti. It's your natural constitution that you can change to some degree, but basically it doesn't go away completely. Similarly, our swabhava, our natural mental disposition, comes along with us when we take birth due to the momentum that we ourselves created in previous births. It's nobody else's fault. Though there are 8 billion human beings, nobody counted, but we think there's 8 billion humans on the planet right now, Lord Krishna knows that each of those 8 billion people will fall into one of the four types, one of the four varnas. Varna just means color. So he's talking about it in the sense that your mind has a color. It could be any color, but basically four groups of people. And due to our swabhava, our natural qualities, we are naturally led towards certain duties or social roles, which is actually good for society, because when people do what they're good at, it will be more efficient and there will be more self-satisfaction. A perfect example would be some people really want to have a desk job. They just want to sit in a chair and then work on a computer or something. And then there are people who loathe such a job because it's just that too much sedentary drives them crazy. So simple things, even in today's world, we can see these differences. And later in the last verse of the previous class, Krishna said that even though all these people have different types of duties, they all can obtain the same outcome from doing their duties. That outcome is called Chitta Shuddhi, which we could say in English, we could call it inner purification. And that is equal for everybody, so there's no grading in that way. And though their actions are different, the common factor is their attitude, which Krishna is going to explain in the verses to follow. But if you've already read or studied the Bhagavad Gita somewhat, you know that there's something called karma yoga, and that's exactly what he's talking about. He just is presenting it from a different angle. And he utilizes this opportunity to sum up the karma yoga topic in the first 3 verses tonight. For the practitioner of karma yoga, all their actions become a manasa puja, a mental worship, making the essential part the same for everybody. Our attitude should be, by performing my duty, I am worshipping Amma. And we will go into the first verse, which is verse 46. Yata pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana tamabhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha. I made some changes just to make it simpler, to easier to follow. Through one's own duty, worshipping that from which all beings evolve and by whom all this is pervaded, one attains perfection. I'm just going to use a few lines from Shankaracharya's commentary. The rest of it is kind of simple, and the same meaning that we just heard. But this part about from whom is the evolution of all beings, he says that means God, Ishvara. And he adds in the Antaryaman, the ruler within. So actually, we're talking about the evolution of all beings being God, and then he says it's in you. So it's like saying we created the universe. And in a sense, it seems to be true because Maya is just a projection and we take it to be real even though it isn't. And about this one attains perfection, that part, he says it means only getting qualified for the devotion to the path of knowledge. So in other words, right now we don't have love for knowledge. If we did, we would be thinking about it all day long. But here we're trying to develop that love or the devotion to the path of knowledge. And that is the first outcome of studying this, and that's why he's saying it's not God realization. Perfection doesn't mean self-realization. It just means now we're qualified for devotion to the path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. Yaneshwar says, just as a lamp is filled with light in and out, So too this universe is pervaded by the Supreme Self. O brave Arjuna, this Supreme Self becomes pleased when worshipped with flowers in the form of fulfilling swadharma, one's natural duties. So that's how we have to make Amma pleased. If the Supreme Self is pleased with this worship, it grants the devotee the gift of non-attachment as a token of its grace. What a gift. If next time somebody says, what do you want for your birthday? You say, I want non-attachment. And nobody can buy that. I don't think they sell it at Walmart or Target or anything. But we can get it from Amma if we do our duty. Then the seeker only thinks of God, as a result of which the pleasures of the world make them nauseous, as if offered vomited food. So you bring them a bowl of ice cream and they think it looks like vomit to them. Just as a faithful wife, suffering the pangs of separation from her husband, finds her life unbearable, so too the seeker feels all worldly enjoyments to be painful. Thus, even before the attainment of self-knowledge, their mind thinks of God and becomes identified with Him. For this reason, one who takes the vow of liberation should perform their duties with zeal. Now that means if you're not interested in liberation, then you can do whatever you want. But I think Amma would say, it's like when you go to Amma and you say, what should I do? You do what you want. That happened to me once. I came on the US tour in 1994. But as soon as I landed in America, I thought, I made a big mistake. I should have stayed in India. And then I went over to Amma during darshan. I said, what should I do? Should I stay here or go? She was like, you came all the way here. Why are you talking about that? And then I was like, and I asked her again the next day, and she says, do what you want. You don't want her to tell you that. Because she knows that, we're not going to be able to absorb what she says. And Chidbhavananda Swami's commentary, by doing one's duty properly, everyone is contributing their part to the whole. With the right attitude, purification of the mind is expedited. One's swadharma, natural duty, becomes the means to gain wisdom and ultimately for attaining God. So we should all be convinced by this time. The common notion of people is that worshipping God and discharging one's worldly duties are two separate things. Such a person betrays their ignorance of worshipping God. While earning a living, the same endeavor can be made to serve another purpose by regarding it as worship. A coconut contains the fibrous sheath outside, the shell inside, and the kernel within. The sheath has to be peeled off. That's not easy, and that's probably another analogy. And the shell broken in order to get the kernel. Similarly, doing one's duty as adoration of God is the means to get the kernel, which is God in our heart. So to me, this verse shows us that by converting our actions into a puja, we become purified inside. And that is how we get the chitta shuddhi. With our bhava, or our feeling, we convert the mundane into the sacred, be it cooking, cleaning, walking, sitting, eating, anything. Anything can be turned into a puja. And just like in an external puja, we mentally offer all of our actions like flowers at Amma's feet. People are saying that every morning I offer these words at Amma's feet. Okay, when you're on a stage and you're thinking about it, that's okay. But can you put a argument with somebody at Amma's lotus feet? No, because that's not actually what we intended to do. But after the fact, we can ask her to help us and surrender that anger or whatever it was. And to make it a little bit more tangible, we can mentally say, Amma, I'm about to take a shower. Like the water removes the external impurities, may I use this body for good deeds that remove the internal impurities. Just one example. Or we can apply this to eating as well. Oh Amma, thank you so much for this prasad, and may my mind also become full of the remembrance of you. So these are little ways of tying in these, episodes in your daily routine that you can tie to Amma or your beloved deity. Though they're only words, there's a subtle sankalpa, a resolve, and that is, really, this is not for me. It only enables me to live a life of spirituality and service. And when this becomes a deep habit, selflessness becomes more than just an ideal. It starts to sprout inside of us as a reality. That means that we don't care whether anybody else knows, appreciates, or congratulates us for it. We just are content in understanding that for ourselves. That even goes for your so-called real occupation, because things can change at any moment. Let's say we work hard to get a raise, but the exact opposite happens, because the company has to adopt some austerity measures and everybody's salary gets reduced. Then the expectation we cherished in our heart for so long will become a hindrance in accepting our new reality and our happiness. Instead, if our purpose at work is to become a more patient, compassionate, and humble person, then we will be able to accept whatever may come. We will always be on good terms with reality, which is probably a good idea, because it is a fact, and a mind that can accept facts is always helpful. If we cannot accept facts, then one commentator has said that it creates resistance. And in electrical engineering, when you increase the resistance, you get heat, right? So that's why when we try to resist the facts of life, then we get heated up and we get upset. We are basically talking about two factors: offering our actions to Amma, which Amma calls puja manobhavam, and receiving the outcome as a prasad, which we could call prasada buddhi. And that is the standard for any kind of puja anyhow. And like any other puja, it takes time to get it right. We're not going to sit down and do a puja perfectly for the first time. So like same thing with this karma yoga, it takes decades, lifetimes. Long practice is required, and for better or worse, our entire life is the remedial school that teaches us how to do it right. So if you make mistakes, just chalk it up to learning, as long as you don't repeat it over and over again. So long as we are convinced inside, we won't get confused by others' words. Just repeat to yourself, this is for Amma, not for me. May she be pleased, not I. I'm ready to accept whatever prasad she gives to me as a result of my actions. A devotee once asked Amma, it is said that one should always remember God. How is that possible when one is doing some calculations or other work requiring mental concentration? Now, I've had questions like that before, but this answer is going to be my standard answer from now on. Amma replied, son, it is possible, even though the goal at that moment is something else. Whatever kind of work it may be, it requires concentration. Even while working, we can surrender our action and its fruit at God's feet. We can remember Him by praying, O Lord, make these calculations correct. You tie everything into that. You are the power behind my memory. Please help me memorize everything accurately. My Lord, make me do this quickly. Oh Lord, why is this taking such a long time? Thus, you can always remember God while at work. If this becomes a habit, then you can have thoughts of God even while doing the calculations. If you find it difficult, then you should just pray before doing the work. Oh, my beloved Lord, or we can just say, Amma, I'm going to do this work. Please give me enough mental strength to do this as worship to you. Help me to do this work with the right attitude. This is yours, not mine. I'm not doing it, you're doing it. So we have to say it either during or beforehand. I'd recommend starting off with beforehand, and gradually you'll get better at it. Then do the work sincerely, with concentration, and as best as you can, without thinking of the results. Try to derive happiness from the spirit in which you are doing the work. When it is over, again pray, O Lord, thank you for your blessings and guidance. I now surrender both the action and its fruit at your feet. Because afterwards you have to say it again. Otherwise, if it went really well, you'll be like, okay, I did it. So when this is practiced daily and constantly, she says, it will become spontaneous. To me, it sounds like a karma yoga manual that we can all, like, again, tattoos, getting out of space for tattoos when I'm talking about getting a tattoo so I don't forget Amma's teachings. Basically, we should be content with whatever work we're doing at that time. But we can also educate ourselves, and Amma does sometimes say that, like take courses and get some, credentials for some kind of a job, if they want. And as a result, they might find an occupation that is more internally rewarding. But without seeking a deeper understanding of things, we should not let the mind complain, because the mind will say, we want to raise, I want respect, I want a better office, I want everything, Then so that's just the whining of the mind, and it's opposite of what we're trying to do. The key is knowledge, so that the pursuit of knowledge should be the factor that determines what we do. And the most important knowledge is that of our own mind, how to convert its negative tendencies into virtues. Amma's amazing at doing that. She is the queen of that, and she's doing it to all of us. But the problem is that when we're not with her, we have to make sure we practice the same thing. Now, this part about that from which all beings evolve and by whom all this is pervaded, it's kind of a long description of that. But it clarifies that there's only one God, because everything is one God, and everything came from that divinity. But for a karma yogi, it is a little difficult to understand or to know the formless absolute. That's called Nirguna Brahma. They still need a name and form for their worship, like Amma, with a theoretical understanding of the formless. That's kind of where we are, most of us. We understand it theoretically, but we still, even after, I'm sure everybody will want to look at Amma and cry tears of devotion, but the knowledge of Nirguna Brahman should be there also. It's the end all and be all of spirituality. If God is actually formless, then where should we offer our worship? Well, we know what Amma would say. She would say, everywhere. Plants, trees, insects, animals, everything. For more advanced karma yogis, you can mentally offer your worship to your co-workers, maybe even your boss. And for highly advanced karma yogis, they even try to worship their spouse. Think you can do that? I don't know. I don't have a spouse, so I'm sure it's not easy. Seriously though, if we truly believe that God is all-pervading, our family members, even our enemies, are no exception. And even though the most of this is review about Karma Yoga, we can revisit verses like chapter 3, verse 9, and chapter 2, verse 48. I will let you pick that up yourself so we can move on to the next verse, 47. Sreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhava Niyatam Karma Kurvannapno Kurvannatno Kurvannapnoti Kilbisham. Last time I think I forgot to read through. Sorry about that. Now together we're going to chant it. Sreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhava Niyatam Karma Kurvannapnoti Kilbisham. Though, in parentheses, though devoid of merit, though in parentheses, though devoid of merit, one's own duty is better than the dharma of another well performed. One who does the duty ordained by his own nature incurs no sin. Okay, this is pretty clear, but let's hear some commentaries anyhow. Shankaracharya, this part, devoid of merit, he says seemingly devoid of merits. It means like you're not, the idea here originally is that you're going to incur sin when you do some, actions. And he's saying no, it just seems like that, possibly. Ordained as they are by the scriptures, the swadharmas, the natural duties, cannot really be devoid of merits. They may appear so, as when Arjuna felt that his kshatriya dharma was the cause of great sin in chapter 1, verse 45. That's all I'm taking from Shankaracharya's commentary, and we'll hear what Jnaneshwar has to say. Even though one's own duty is difficult to perform, one should keep its ultimate result in view. If a person were to give up his duty on the ground that it is hard to perform, he would be deprived of the bliss of liberation. Because, as we just heard in the previous verse, that karma yoga is the first step towards liberation. And deprived doesn't mean it's the only way of getting liberation, but it's where you have to start. So if you don't even start, you're not going to get to the pinnacle for sure. Even if a child's mother is ugly, the motherly love behind her appearance is graceful. The mothers of other children may be more beautiful than the heavenly beauty Rambha, but of what avail are they to the child? What is poison to the world is like nectar to the germs. It means probably tiny microorganisms. And what is jaggery to the world proves fatal to the germs. For this reason, one should perform their natural duties by which they can hope to attain liberation, though it may be difficult to accomplish. If one were to perform another's duty, thinking it to be better than their own, it is like walking on their head instead of their legs. Yeah, that seems pretty difficult. Therefore, if one performs one's duty, which has fallen to their inborn nature, they alone triumph over the bonds of action. So this inborn nature, like I said, it's not like somebody assigned it to them. We assigned it to ourselves from our past life activities and thoughts. Chidbhavananda Swami's commentary. The actions that are in tune with a person's disposition is their swadharma. Arjuna's nature ordains his path as a warrior. Events have driven him to the necessity of waging a righteous war. His duty is to pursue it, even if it proves to be disadvantageous to him personally. If the odds turn against him, even then his duty is to fight to the finish. It is possible for him to retreat from the battlefield and resort to severe austerity, tapas, in the forest. For a warrior, however, an imperfect war is better than becoming a perfect sannyasi. One trained for medicine should not choose to become a lawyer on the ground that they can plead a case very fluently. It is detrimental if one changes one's calling due to their likes and dislikes, because they will become slaves to them. This is the problem. It's not that you can't change jobs, but later on in today's class, you're going to hear a long speech from Amma about not going after greed. On the other hand, their swadharma is as natural to them as water is to a fish. Taking up and discharging his duties are not a strain to Arjuna at all. He executes it almost involuntarily. A yogi is one who achieves the maximum benefit with minimum effort. So when we're trying to, do something that gives more money, but we're not so familiar with, we spend way too much time and effort to do something simple that for someone to whom it comes naturally. So they're saying, why don't you just do what comes to you naturally? The first line of this verse already came in chapter 3, and that is, I think it's 35, and it starts off, because one can perform it, one's own dharma, though lesser in merit, is better than the dharma of another. But the second line in that verse is different from this verse. The second line in chapter 3 was, better is death in one's own dharma. The dharma of another brings danger. Even if a person is not able to do their swadharma perfectly, I think it doesn't matter, or that's what they're saying. Amma says the same thing. Let them do it to the best of their capacity, which is what is important is that one should confine themselves to their swadharma. Once you've selected that profession, the idea is that you should stick with it, unless perhaps you can do more good for the world if you change. I know Amma has recruited people for the university, and they're teaching things that they didn't actually study about so much, but through her grace, they learn it very quickly, and they're already scholars, so it's not such a big difference. But some people, if they try to make big changes to get big salaries. What if they are an expert in somebody else's dharma? Well, Krishna is saying, don't meddle with other people's stuff, because it's their dharma, and you're just going to create confusion. And if you really examine the people who give you advice, it's not uncommon for people to offer unsolicited advice when their own personal lives are nowhere near ideal. So you might want to check their closets and their closets and in their bathrooms and their bedrooms to see if they have their stuff together. Usually they don't. Usually they prefer to give advice but not follow it. So we should avoid that tendency in both others and ourselves. Instead of allowing others and ourselves to get sidetracked, it's better to focus on our own duties and do them properly. Actually, someone asked Amma about this very same topic. They said, Amma, we are householders who have to work in the world to earn our livelihood and protect our families. Do we have to choose any particular field of action to experience love and freedom? Amma replied, children, stay where you are and do your duty with love and dedication. If you are married and settled in the world, don't run away, abandoning your job and your responsibilities as a spouse and a parent. Don't think that God will accept you only if you renounce all your duties and wear red robes. No. Continue to wear the same clothes. Okay, good. And perform your duties, stay at home, and do your work. But at the same time, learn to live within your true self. Wow, she just took it from a mundane conversation to something very deep. At the same time, learn to live within your true self. This is the most important art that we should learn. We learn everything else but this, the art of dwelling in our own self. We should try to live according to our own dharma. We should never try to adopt someone else's dharma, for that would be as dangerous as a dentist trying to act as a cardiologist. It would be dangerous for both him and his patients if he tried to do something that he's not qualified to do. Needless to say, the dentist should stick to his own job. He has enough to do in his own field, but by diligently performing each action with an attitude of love, dedication, and self-surrender, he can attain perfection. One cannot live without being active in some way, whether physically, mentally, or intellectually. Still, I'm not talking. Everyone is constantly engaged in some form of action. This is an exact same message that Krishna gives about karma yoga earlier in the Gita. This is an unchangeable law of nature. No one becomes pure and selfless overnight. It takes time and concentrated effort, coupled with tremendous patience and love. Do your actions in the world while forgetting that your Do your actions in the world without forgetting that your final goal in life is to break all bondage and limitations. So when you're, really busy with something and you're just feeling like, oh, I can't do this, and then you can remind yourself, okay, I'm not doing it for this deadline. I'm doing it because I want to break all the bondages, everything that creates sorrow for me. I'm trying to eliminate that. And this is part of it, and it's a step to that goal. So I'm going to pick myself up by my bootstraps. Always remember that you have a higher goal to attain. Simply do what needs to be done, but at the same time, don't miss the opportunities you come across to perform unselfish actions. You will then gradually gain mental purity and devotion. As you proceed with diligence, you will attain more clarity of mind and a deeper understanding. This will finally lead you to the state of perfection, the state of self-realization. Isn't that, they ask these worldly questions, and Amma ends up with the state of self-realization. Only Amma can do this. Okay, we'll go to the next verse, 48. Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosham apinatyajet sarvarambha hidoshena tumednagnir ivavrataha. Together. Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosham api natyajet sarvarambha hidoshena dume nagnerivavradaha. One should not relinquish, O Arjuna, the duty to which one is born, though it be deficient, for all undertakings are clouded by defects as fire by smoke. Not a big difference, just a slight. Now the commentaries. Shankaracharya says, the duty to which one is born means it has arisen even at their very birth, and that's due to the gunas, the qualities. We're saying this over and over again, but we have to remember, because this is a common criticism of the Bhagavad Gita. You're saying that they were born into this family, that's why. No, they're born with gunas, with qualities, disposition. Though it be deficient means because it is composed of the three gunas. So, what about other people's? And then he says the part about all undertakings are clouded by defects means all duties, whatever they may be, whether it is one's own or those of another, all are made up of the three gunas. So there's always going to be some imperfections. Anything that is tangible is by definition imperfect. Close to perfect is there, but no perfection is there. The significance, according to Shankaracharya, is abandoning one's natural duty, swadharma, even though one might perform the duty of another, they will not be free from defect. Thus, another person's duty also produces danger. If you go from one to another, all different types of duties, trying to find the magic key, you're not going to find it. That's basically what he's saying. Just stick with what you have and be happy with that, because that's the spiritual approach. Yaneshwar says, since every action involves labor in the beginning, why find fault with one's own duty on the ground that it is laborious? Because everything is laborious. O Arjuna, one becomes equally fatigued even if one walks on a highway or a side road. Whether one carries a stone or provision for the journey, the burden is the same. Therefore, one should carry the burden that, when reaching the rest house, will relieve fatigue caused by the journey. One should perform one's own duty, which removes fatigue and helps one to attain liberation, which is the highest end of human life. If one cannot avoid death by turning one's back to the enemy, then why not face the enemy and fight him? Therefore, if we cannot avoid physical labor in performing any action, even the one of our own liking, then how can we complain that our swadharma is difficult to perform? Why not spend all we have and get a little quantity of nectar, of amritam, that makes life immortal? Why should we buy poison, drink it, and die, and also incur the sin of committing suicide? This is all figurative, don't worry. He's saying that, if you follow your natural disposition and do it sincerely, you're going to progress much faster than you would in other forms. And when you try to force something that doesn't fit you, it's like death, because you just suffer so much. O Arjuna, just as one should not forget their mantra in a difficult situation, one should not give up one's duty at any time. One who wishes to cross the sea should not forget to take the ship. One who is suffering from leprosy should not forget to take their medicine. So too, their intellect should not forget to follow their duty. When God is pleased by worship in the form of one's duty, He destroys the rajas and tamas qualities in the worshipper, leads them along the road of sattva guna, and makes them feel heaven and earth like poison. Then the seeker attains the plane of non-attachment. This is amazing. So, previously we heard, if we do our dharma properly, God gives us a token gift of non-attachment. And here, Jnaneshwar is saying that as a token of His pleasure, God destroys the rajas and tamas qualities in us. And the whole time we've been talking about sattva, 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 and we were saying to ourselves, that's so hard to do because we don't have enough sattva. Well, He is saying, no, God is going to give us that sattva if we do our duty faithfully. And then this part about feeling heaven and earth like poison, that's non-attachment. Because, as we've said many times, Amma does not want us to go for heaven, because that's just going to temples and bartering with God. And anyhow, you have to come back. And so life in earth and life in heaven are based not much different. There's more pleasures in heaven, but what happens is that you deplete your strength by experiencing so much pleasure. So it's like you go backwards even. So he says that's why he says then the seeker attains the plane of non-attachment. Bhavananda Swami says, a truth reveals itself to one who desists from likes and dislikes, and who inquires into actions with an equipoised mind. There is no karma whatsoever in nature which is completely free from defect. Now, karma means activity here. And so, well, actually I can't say that. Human activity is not actually part of nature, because it is the intelligence or the consciousness that gives any life to Prakriti, to Maya. So otherwise it would just be inert matter. We cannot breathe without hurting millions of microbes in the atmosphere. When we eat, we deprive food from another. There is no karma no actions completely free from imperfection. Then, why the distinction between vice and virtue? Among action, what produces more evil than good is called vice, and what produces more good than evil is virtue. But the yogi has their own criterion. They discharge their duty as an act of worship, and they perform actions that are fit for their body, and they act with the sole motive of reaching the state of inaction, self-realization. This question about relinquishing one's dharma comes up over and over, so Amma has to respond to such questions very frequently. One person asked Amma, in the Gita, Lord Krishna says that whatever happens, we should never abandon our own dharma. But if that is so, how can a person leave his or her profession for another job that's more profitable? Now, we just talked about it a minute ago, so you can guess what she says. And her response is a little long, but I think it's worth it. Amma's answer revealed the answers to all the problems and all the causes of this topic, actually. And she said, in those days, many people believed that they could attain liberation only by giving up all work, retreating to the forest and living as sannyasis. In response, Lord Krishna proclaimed that it isn't necessary to forsake everything. People should perform their duties in the world, firmly established in their own dharma. The Lord made it clear that instead of abandoning duties, performing those duties with the right attitude leads us to liberation. There is another dimension to this topic. A child born into the family of a sculptor can easily become a good sculptor, because the circumstances favor that potential. Most likely, the child was born with the same gift. That's interesting, I didn't know that. The father's or mother's talents passed to the child as its heritage. It may take the child 10 days to grasp what others would take a year to learn. Thus, there lies great potential to advance if one works steadfastly in one's hereditary craft. Others coming from outside the craft will have to learn it from scratch. Amma, it's interesting because I've seen Amma recommending to young people to take up the profession of their father or mother. Not always, but there's a correlation I've noticed, and now she's confirming it, the reason. At that time, people performed their traditional vocations mostly in their own homes. They didn't work in an office or in a factory. Everyone in the family joined in the traditional work. It's a family affair, really. People used to enter their family profession after receiving their education That is what is called a Gurukula. It means a school where the Guru lives. And Amma has said that Amritapuri is a kind of a Gurukula, but in the ancient times, the parents would take the child to the Guru at age 8, and the boy or girl, whatever it was, they were probably separate, I would imagine. They would stay 12 years with that Guru. And then after that, they decide what they do with the rest of their life. That's another subject. We can talk about that part for a lot. So which of the 4 main varnas, remember, social duties, they belong to was decided on the basis of the profession they chose, not their birth. No one is born with a particular social role or religion. There you have it. She's just said it loud and clear. All are simply God's children. Only when people grew up were they divided into different varnas on the basis of the work that they take to. It's not like indentured servitude. In those days, a child born in a Kshatriya family had the right to become a Brahmin, could be a priest or a Vedic teacher, and a child of a Brahmin family could become a Kshatriya, like a prince or a warrior. In the olden days, people didn't work just to earn an income. Everyone's goal in life was self-realization, and one's work was a means to attain that state. So she's basically describing Amritapuri. Everybody's there for self-realization. I was thinking to myself when I was reading this, like, I wonder if there's a place like that. And I was like, duh. You lived there for 10 years. Okay. In the perfection of their work, people tasted the experience of God. When everyone seeks to work only for financial gain, the harmony of the social order will be lost. Selfishness and greed will prevail. In those days, the custom of paying a predetermined wage to workers didn't exist. Workers were paid the amount they needed, and an atmosphere of love existed between workers and their employers. They respected one another. Those who paid wages and those who received them were both fully satisfied. That custom disappeared when people grew more selfish. The attitude of employers changed to less pay, more work, and employees began to think, less work, more pay. How are these two groups going to get along? Today, most people want their children to become engineers and doctors, etc., in order to be respected in society and earn a lot of money. Few parents pay any attention to their child's real aptitude. If the spirit of competition that prevails in education is a healthy one, it would help children to advance and bring out their talents. Instead, the competition today causes tension amongst students. They lose their mental strength when they fail to achieve their aims and end up spending the rest of their lives in despair. There are people who were so depressed when they met Amma. Ramakrishnananda Swami and some others were there. They wanted to become doctors, but they didn't go well. But as soon as they were kind of depressed, but when they met Amma, all that vanished. They realized that it was a foolish thing. And their despair drives many of them to suicide. This should not happen. Actually, every year or every semester, whatever it is, in Kerala and probably other states, when the test results come out, the police are stationed on the coastlines because a lot of people don't know how to swim. I think most people don't know how to swim over there. And so they just jump in the ocean. That's a sure death knoll. They're going to die. So they prevent them from jumping into the ocean if they didn't get the grades they wanted. The aims of education and securing a job should be our spiritual development and service to the world. These goals will motivate us to advance in any field. Even if we happen to fail, it will only prompt us to try again and not to succumb to despair. When we select a field as our life's work, we should try to gain as much expertise as possible in that area. We should stick to it and find success in life. The aim of life is not to become a millionaire, but to enjoy eternal bliss. But still, a householder has a duty to support the family. When accepting compensation for our work, our only aim should be to earn what we need. If you leave your field of work and select another, it means that you are not satisfied. But you won't necessarily find contentment in your new job either, because contentment depends on the mind and not on external actions or situations. If people leave their professions with a desire to earn excessive profits, it simply shows their greed. Without changing their attitude, they will never find contentment in life. You may know some people that have had like 10, 15 jobs in their lifetime. But for those who have controlled their minds, every situation will be favorable. They will enjoy any field of work. Nothing will make them feel dissatisfied. We should cultivate this frame of mind in whatever we do. I think this is a great thing for the C20, that working group for education. I'm going to send it to them. In this verse, Krishna says that every swadharma has its own advantages and disadvantages. When you look from one angle, it appears to have advantages, and from another angle, it appears to have disadvantages also. So there's no such thing as an ideal or perfect duty. When I was a senior in college, my best friend and I were just racking our brains trying to find the ideal profession. And we, had this long list, and we ticked off everything. Nope, this is no good, no good, no good, no good. And believe it or not, we found the only thing that we found that was going to be perfect was the military. Because we wanted to be physically challenged, mentally challenged, and intellectually challenged. Anyhow, we thought the highest thing in the world was justice at that time. So we thought that was the perfect job. Of course, I didn't take that path. But he did actually, and he's doing well, I guess. The reason is that action or activity belongs to Prakriti. And Prakriti cannot be anything other than a mixture of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. That means it belongs to Maya, where everything has good and bad sides. Like all the other temptations in Maya, at first glance, someone else's duty looks good and desirable at a distance. But once you get to know what it's really like, manifold defects present themselves to us, and we want to run away. You may have heard this story about Pum Pum, but it's a perfect example, and Amma uses it all the time, so I know she likes it. So, a man visits a what is it called? Psychiatric institution to write an article about the conditions, what kind of lives these people go through. And so the director took him for a tour, and they saw a few people, and then he or she directed him to a particular room, and he could hear the person in that room saying, "Boom, boom, 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 boom." And he was just sitting there and doing that all day long. And he said, "What is this? What's wrong with this person?" And the director said, "It's a really sad story. He was just about to marry a girl, a woman, and her pet name, or the nickname was Pum Pum. And she jilted him at the altar, and he could not recover from the shock." And the visitor said, "Oh, that's so sad. I'm sorry to hear that." And they walk around, and then they come to another room where someone was going, "Boom, boom, 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 boom." And he was knocking his head on the wall. And the man says, "What is going on? This guy was also one of her boyfriends?" And he said, No. This is the man that actually married Pum Pum." So, the other guy thought that Pum Pum was a heavenly damsel, and the guy who married her figured out what she really was. And she probably figured out what he was too, so maybe she's in the same institution. Also, there's a beautiful story that Amma tells, which I'm not going to tell in its entirety, but the gist is that all the animals were complaining about what they have to do. The pig is, I'm always rolling in mud, and then the snake, I have to eat mice, and everybody has some some kind of complaint to give Brahmaji, the creator. And he goes, okay, put all of your bondages down here on a big pile. And there was a huge pile like the Himalayas. And then take one other. Well, take whichever one you want. And they were so happy that they could take somebody else's burden, not the one they had before. And then after some time, they all came back and they said, I want my thing back because it's better, it's easier. I'm used to it and I'm good at it. So whether it is someone who works on an hourly rate or the proprietor or an official of the city, all of them will tell stories about how they want to change jobs. Even the householder brahmanas, the priests, have a lot of things they could complain about if they wanted to. They have to get up every morning very, very early, sit on the floor and do pujas and chant the Vedas for hours and hours. And they don't get any salary, or they didn't used to get any salary. Still, it is better to stick with the original duties and learn to love what you do. And this is the secret of life, we could say. Otherwise, if you're doing a job that you loathe and you have to go every day, what kind of life is that? And as for brahmanas, they have to do the same thing every day, so they may become bored with the routine. People say, oh, Brahmins have an easy life. In fact, some temples in India are abandoned because there's nobody to maintain them. Over time, the priests gradually lost their respect and value from the temple. For the temple, I've heard this from a Brahmin, it's not me saying it. Some might think that the priests have an ideal job, but the priests themselves may disagree. Naturally, this doesn't apply to ammas, ashrams, and temples. The pujaris do it with great love, shraddha, and remembrance of Amma. The point here is just that even the most attractive profession can become a burden. Now the part about the fire and smoke. Why this analogy about fire and smoke? Well, in the olden days, firewood was the only way to cook. And wherever there's firewood, there is going to be smoke when you use it for cooking. So, and you have to cook unless you want to starve. So similarly, activity and defects are inseparable. If you want to do something, there's going to be some smoke. It's not going to be so pleasant, but that's part of the package, basically, because it's Maya, and there's nothing perfect in Maya. So therefore, continue your own swadharma. And even after liberation, one can continue the swadharma, just as King Janaka continued ruling the country even after attaining self-knowledge. And you may know of the Saint Nisargadatta. He was in, I think, Mumbai, and he died decades ago. But he was a Vaishya, you would say. He was a merchant. But he actually realized God. So we would call him a Jnani Vaishya. He's a knower, and he's also a merchant. And even after he got realization, he continued running his business. And if you want to know more about him, you can read chapter 5 in Paramatmananda Swami's book, On the Road to Freedom. Now we'll go to verse 49, a new topic. Asakta buddhi sarvatra Jitatma Vigata Spraha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sannyasena Digacchati. Now together. Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Jitatma Vigata Spraha Naishkarmya Siddham Paramam Sannyasena Digacchita. Sannyasena Digacchati. Sorry. One whose intellect is unattached everywhere, who has subdued their self, free from desires, by renunciation they attain to the supreme perfection, consisting of freedom from action. Okay, now the commentary. Consisting of freedom from action. Wow, that sounds great. I can just sit on the couch and just watch Netflix and what all these things, Amazon Prime all day long. Shankaracharya says, this subdued their self means the antakarana. Antakarana means not just the mind but the intellect as well. And free from desires, he says it means free from bodily yearnings for life and pleasures. And he says that one of this description is a knower of the self. So we're talking about the real deal. The previously it was like, now we're qualified for jnana yoga, but this means no, this person has completed jnana yoga, and we're going to hear some beautiful descriptions of what that means in a moment. And attains to the supreme perfection consisting of freedom from actions. Okay. And Shankaracharya says this means on account of their perfect knowledge of the actionless Brahman. So he knows he is Brahman, and Brahman doesn't, is just, it's everything. So since there's only one Brahman, there can be nothing interacting with it. There's only Brahman. So that's why it's actionless. Jnaneshwar says, as the wind is not entangled in a net, they are not entangled in the snares of Maya like the body. When the fruit becomes ripe, it does not cling to the stem, nor does the stem remain attached to the fruit. Similarly, their attachment to worldly life diminishes. Even though their son, wealth, and spouse act according to their wishes, they do not call them their own. That's the hard part. There's a story that, I think it was Ramatirtha, when he wanted to leave his house, his wife says, I wanted to come along with him. And then he said, okay, but you have to fulfill these 3 conditions. The first one is you have to become a sannyasi, sannyasini. She says, okay. And then the next condition was you have to go out in the middle of the village and with our children, with probably said your children, and publicly denounce that they're yours. And she says, I can't do that. And he says, then you can't come. So saying that the family is not your own seems to be difficult for some people. Now their intellect, which has been scorched by sensual enjoyments, turns inward to the contemplation of the self. I love this explanation. Even if their mind wanders and comes into contact with sense objects, they never forget the oath they have taken not to go after them. Then, holding their mind in the grip of unity, they make it cherish the self. Just as smoke is smothered by the dust covering the fire, their desire for sense enjoyment in this and in the next world is destroyed. In short, they attain to the plane of yoga. See, here's a reference to yoga as being something other than hatha yoga. It means the highest plane. With the end of false knowledge, they remain absorbed in knowledge of the self. Just as stored water gets exhausted by gradual use, so too their accumulated karma from past lives gets burned off by being in their present body, and their mind does not feel like doing more deeds. So that's why people like Ramana Maharshi, he didn't do anything. He just sat there because he had no desires. And also, they tend to die from very painful diseases because they have they're Jivan Muktas, which means they got liberation while in that birth. They're not avatars. And since they are Jivan Muktas, they have karma to be burnt off. And so they don't care if the body dies from cancer or something, because that's the end of the karma. It doesn't affect their mind anyhow. When they attain equanimity of mind through dharmic actions, they get their guru's darshan without any effort on their part. That means internally. When the night is over, no, they don't go in the darshan line and ask for a token, right? When the night is over, the sun, who is the enemy of darkness, makes its appearance. When the plantain, it's like a banana tree, the plantain bears a bunch of bananas, its growth comes to a stop. In the same way, when the seeker receives the Guru's darshan, they become perfect and their activity comes to an end. O great warrior, just as the moon goes into its full face on the night of the full moon and lacks nothing, so too they become full of the Guru's grace. Just as darkness disappears along with the night, so too, through their master's grace, their ignorance vanishes. There you go. That shows the gap between nididhyasana and mukti, because this is the cushion in between. I'll read it again. Just as darkness disappears along with the night, so too, through their master's grace, their ignorance vanishes. And when ignorance, which is the root cause of action, is destroyed, even the name Maya becomes obliterated, and the knower themselves becomes that which is to be known. Since we're not realized, then the thing to be known is Amma, or we can say Brahman or Atman, but they have become that. So there's no need for any more terminology. If a person dreams that they were drowning in deep waters, will they make an effort to save themselves from drowning after waking up? No. In the same way, when the bad dream that I am ignorant, now I have attained knowledge, comes to an end, their notions of the knowing agent and the object of knowledge cease, and they themselves become all-pervasive knowledge. This is a 16-year-old, okay? So he's explaining his own experience. That's all it is. When the mirror is set aside, the reflection, as well as the act of seeing in the mirror, stop, and the seer alone remains. So when ignorance ceases, that act of knowing also ceases, and only the inactive self remains behind. O Arjuna, as the self by nature is not active, this state is called actionlessness, naishkarmya. Just as the flow of the Ganges stops when it joins the sea, with the end of ignorance, knowledge also ceases, and the state when all activity comes to an end is reached. You understand why knowledge ceases, because you've become that. There's nothing to know. You are that. When this state is attained, nothing remains to be achieved. So it is called the highest perfection. But this state of self-realization is obtained by a blessed one only through the grace of their guru. So, people may talk a lot of theory, but you can say, excuse me, do you have a guru? And if no, I just know, then say, okay, fine. but it's not going to happen. Eventually they'll find a guru, a real guru. And Chidbhavananda Swami's commentary, a karma yogi is engaged in intense activities. One form of activity succeeds another as the hour of the clock advances one after the other. They seem to know no rest. Yes, she's the consummate karma yogi, even though she is well past karma yoga. This is the spectacle they present to an onlooker, but what they actually are at the core of their heart should be studied. They do not identify themselves with any place or residence. Wherever they happen to be placed is acceptable to them as their residence. In other words, they don't get attached to any place anywhere. Many things are handled by them, but they are dispersed even as they come. That's why during darshan you see all these people surrounding Amma. She's just finishing one thing. Someone comes up, they have a problem, they have an idea, they have something they want to do, and they have a talent, and then she calls up a few people, 5-10 minutes, it's all done, and then it's been handed off to somebody else. But it wouldn't happen if Amma weren't there. That's the difference. Many things are handled by them, but they are dispersed even as they come. No modification of any kind is produced in the mind of the yogi. So after that, she doesn't think to herself, oh, I did such a good job of setting that up, or I can't wait to see the outcome, it's going to be great. It's like, no. She just doesn't, it's over. And then this is another beautiful analogy. Water flows in one side of a bridge, and it flows out the other side. The bridge is neither the recipient of water, nor is it its distributor. It is unaffected by the flow of the river. The yogi, in that fashion, keeps their mind unaffected by the things of the world. They take no note of the people drawn to them, indifferent to them, and opposed to them. This is the state of the intellect that is unattached everywhere. So that's Amma's detachment. Thoughts and feelings rise in the minds of ordinary people, even as waves do on the sea. But the mind of the yogi maintains a different state. It is like a waveless sea. This placid state is due to the mastery over themselves. Objects of sense pleasure may be displayed in plenty before an innocent child, but the child does not look at them desirously because it has not yet developed a desire for them. A yogi also doesn't behold these objects with any wishful eyes because they have outgrown all desire for sense enjoyment. I think Amma's the former because she's so pure, she's like a child. I was told by somebody long time ago, Amma made a house visit and they went into a room and somebody was watching TV, probably not knowing Amma was there. And I don't know all the details, I don't remember all the details, but suddenly, there's this big TV and then something was showing there. And it was a lot of women dancing and scantily dressed women dancing in some way. And Amma was looking and she says, dancing, dancing. So innocent. Doesn't affect her. She says, oh, it's their dancing, okay. Once a devotee asked Amma, is it possible to do sadhana, which is spiritual practice, while living the life of a householder? I think everybody wants to know what Amma has to say, because this is a very, very popular question. Amma said, son, if one constantly uses their power of discernment, they will understand that all the worldly bondage is nothing. Instead of relinquishing your family and duties all of a sudden, perform your duties without thinking of the past, expectations of the future, or the fruit of your actions. Always live in the present. Do your duties as a service to God or Guru, being careful not to get attached. When you live in this manner, you will feel more peace of mind, and one day you will be able to give up everything and offer yourself completely at the feet of the Lord. Buddha and others led a family life in the beginning, but they were always looking, observing, and studying the nature of the world. They had so much vairagya, detachment. That is why they left their homes. Once detachment came, then there were no more relationships. They could no longer attach themselves to anything. It's just impossible for them. So we should understand that if we are entertaining such ideas, we should be incapable of attaching ourselves to anything. But those who don't have that much vairagya should not try to imitate them. The man asked for a clarification. So does that mean that I just wait until vairagya comes? Amma said, son, what Amma means is that spirituality is not a way to escape from all the problems that confront you. If you run away from your home in the name of spirituality just to avoid the troubles of looking after your family, this does not mean that you have renounced anything. The thoughts about your wife and children will become even stronger in your mind than when you were with them. Therefore, perform your duties and at the same time use your discernment to avoid the danger of getting trapped in excessive attachment. So that means you live your householder life, but do something to keep your mind from going whole hog for all the enjoyments. And she concludes with the words, it is a slow process that requires a lot of patience. So if you have patience problems, you can probably start there, I would say. And with the previous verse, the Karma Yoga topic is over, and we find ourselves reading something quite different. Karma Yoga was worshipping God through our dharma, and the result was mental purification. And remember, Karma Yoga cannot give liberation on its own, no matter how long and how sincerely we do it. But that inner purification is what we get from Karma Yoga, and it is indispensable to understand and practice the Guru's teachings, the Guru Upadesha. And without understanding the Guru's teachings, there's no way we're going to get liberation. In this verse, Krishna has started the topic of Jnana Yoga, which is going to go up to verse 54, so that's 6 verses in total. Some people will say that Jnana Yoga discourages actions, but what do you think Amma says? The most engaged and active person in the whole universe. She says that this is a wrong interpretation of the path of knowledge. Internally, we can withdraw from society and all of its activities, but externally, we may be just as active as we were before. Except we will spend maybe some more time reading and listening about Vedanta and contemplating on the teachings. But even after reaching moksha, a realized being will always set an example for others for the welfare of society, which is exactly what Amma is doing. She is the perfect example. And next, we're going to hear Lord Krishna explain how we can become a perfect human being. Next week. Has to be next week. There are some questions. I can try to answer a couple of them before we close. It's a back and forth conversation, and I'm kind of confused about what I should share at this point. It's about the beginning of the chapter 18. There's a question regarding what Arjuna said. He says, I wish to know severally about sannyas and tyaga. And that, to this person, seems like a fitting opening to the chapter that summarizes the entire Bhagavad Gita. But you say in the lecture that he is asking to differentiate between sannyas and tyaga. And so severally means, I'm just going to say that much because the rest of it I will try to answer, and if the questioner needs more clarification, they're welcome to send another message. To me, it feels like the recap because this is the message we need at this time. We've learned Karma Yoga and we've learned Jnana Yoga, and we've learned that, Jnana Yoga is very advanced, we could say, and it takes time to prepare the mind to even practice that. We can understand it intellectually, but practicing it sincerely and correctly is a whole other thing. So he did say, I want to know severally. So severally to me means I want to hear separately. This, and then tell me about this, from one to the other. And he doesn't, because Krishna was kind of putting them together throughout, He'd use sannyasa here and tyaga there. And so I think maybe Arjuna was getting a little fed up. And he goes, wait a second, I just want to know what's the difference between renunciation and tyaga. And without just ridiculing him, Krishna said in his own way that they're the same thing. So your question is, again, wrong question. Not the person who's asking this question, but Arjuna. Typically, when a disciple or a devotee asks a wrong question, the guru is not going to, ridicule you. They will very patiently guide us towards the right question and then answer that for us. So he thinks that the two are different, sannyasa and tyaga, but Krishna indirectly teaches him and us that there's no difference at all. Arjuna is just trying to find a way to wiggle out of his dharma by saying, okay, if sannyasa is, which is the one that allows me to leave the battlefield? That's basically what his question was. And Krishna says, neither one, sorry. And so his little plan got cut off at the pass, head off at the pass by Krishna. So that problem of not doing his dharma was the problem in the beginning. And it's still the problem for him, or was at the beginning of this chapter. So Krishna is really going for the jugular by not allowing him to, fudge things up. He has to understand the reality behind his own mistakes. So Krishna seems to be steering Arjuna away from his own concepts, which are still wrong, to more helpful concepts. And then that's why Krishna takes sattva, rajas, and tamas, the universal concepts, especially in those days, and he's saying, look, just don't be rajasic or don't be, tamasic. Just do everything sattva, okay? That's all you have to do. And the rest of it's going to fall into place naturally. And that goes for us too. And in two commentaries, we heard this virtually the same thing. By doing your dharma, your swadharma, your mind will become more sattvic, basically. And for that, we have to, there's no running away from the battlefield for a kshatriya. He has to stay there. So that's all I can say for today. And they are the one and the same. And this chapter, the majority of it is to make Arjuna understand that doing his dharma, right here and now, is the most important thing. Another question, which we have very little time for. What is the difference between suppression and sublimation of desires? I understand that right knowledge is needed, but practically it is not an easy task. So just a simple reply for now. To me, the key is how we define sublimation. To me, it means to make something pure. So let's say you have a big chocolate vasana, and then in darshan you can give chocolate to Amma. You could have eaten it yourself, but you're giving it to Amma as a sacrifice. Or you could make chocolate and don't eat any of it until Amma eats some. That's just like you're sublimating your attachment a little bit. There are much harder ways of doing it, but I'm just giving you some doable examples. Let's say you like to cook food and you like to eat food. Well, cook food and feed it to other people. Every first Sunday here in the Chicago ashram, a lot of people help and they take meals for like 150 people at a nearby shelter. So, and we don't eat until everybody there eats. So that's a nice sacrifice for something that people like a lot. And let's say you like to have fashionable clothes. It would have to be a woman, like a sari. Then you get a really nice sari and you give it to Amma instead. That's sublimating that attachment. You have a taste for good clothes, you could say, but let's use that for Amma. And let's say you like to sing bhajans and you have like a little bit of an ego about singing, then just try to sing from your heart for Amma. And not in front of anybody. Do it in front of your altar. And I know a lot of guys like their cars and fast, cool cars. Well, you can use those cars to shuttle elderly people and disabled people to the train station or for shopping. So we're talking about fundamental desires, which everybody has, but you can purify it by using it for a selfless purpose. That's what I got out of it. There are 2 more questions, I believe, which I'll try next week. And I should confess that next week is going to be the last class for a little while, because I'll be out of the country for about 2 months, starting from middle of January. And I could be back in 2 months, but I don't know. It all depends on what Amma is going to do. So now people are saying, what is Amma? She's going to go on tour or what? I don't even know. So I haven't made any plans past that for the next 2 months. Okay? So, but I hope to see you all next week. I'm still here until then. We will conclude with the first 2 closing prayers. And those who have time, please join us for a short meditation. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Let us all meditate for some time. Please check your posture. Take a few long, deep breaths and close your eyes. With each long, deep breath, feel your body and mind relaxing further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you and feel as though you are in her embrace. Feel the warmth of her heart and her love. Now shift your awareness to the rhythmic flow of your breathing process. Witness the breath just like you were sitting on the banks of a peaceful stream, gazing at it and feeling so much peace. Remain as a witness as the breath goes in and out. As we focus our awareness on the breathing process, the mind becomes more and more subtle, and it becomes easier for us to visualize. Let us try to put tonight's teachings put it into practice by visualizing something recent or something coming ahead, where you will be completely unattached. Like Amma, so many things happen and take place around her, but due to her perfect detachment, it doesn't affect her mentally or emotionally. She can do so many things and still remain free from any impression they might give. So all of us have things on our mind. Let us think of how we can apply that idea of non-attachment, like Amma, to approach something or reenact something that has already taken place. Now let us offer our prayers to Amma for her divine guidance and protection. O Amma, you are such an inspiration to all of us. You taught us through your own life how to serve the world. And we are trying to emulate your example. But Amma, at the same time, our selfless service is not completely selfless because we have attachments, too many of them. Without our knowing, they come along with the efforts to serve, like a stowaway. And we want to eject all those stowaways so that we can have only that pure intention of serving. So Amma, please help me every day to shift one worldly attachment to an Amma attachment. May all of my attachment be directed to you, little by little, until I have none left. And then you will be the everything in my life. And that is my goal, Amma. Please help me reach that state. Let us conclude with one more prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can open your eyes if you wish. Once again, thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you next week. Om Namah Shivaya.